Hello, this is Melanie Guralnick, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the December 23rd issue of the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first story is Hunter, Two Perverts, One Prince. Andrew's Peter Nygard Connection in Epstein Files by Brad Hunter. Both men had a penchant for young flesh. It drove their every feverish waking moment. Everything else in their lives was background music. Jeffrey Epstein and Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygard were indeed birds of a feather. Fabulously rich, vainglorious, secretive sex fiends. Both even owned islands in the Caribbean where they hosted sex parties featuring underage girls and a wealthy coterie of similarly inclined pals. And the individual who ties Epstein and Nygard together? Why, it's our old pal Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, once Prince Andrew, or the Duke of York. Andrew has been a frequent flyer in the staggering Epstein document dump that has unleashed a new wave of speculation and rapid-fire bombshells exploding at the feet of the rich and famous. U.S. feds asked for help to speak to Prince. On Monday, one of the files released confirmed that the U.S. feds asked UK officials for help in setting up a voluntary interview with the rogue royal. They wanted him to spill the beans on his connections to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. The Department of Justice also released an email from Andrew asking Maxwell, quote, "Have you found me some new inappropriate friends?" Now in the mix is Canadian fast fashion mogul Nygard. The former rag trade king was sentenced to 11 years in prison in Canada last year after the 84-year-old was convicted of sexual assault. He is now awaiting extradition to the U.S., where he faces a boatload of other charges. But back to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The FBI cautioned British officials in a 2020 email that, quote, Andrew is not presently a target of the investigation, and U.S. authorities have not, to date, gathered evidence that he has committed any crime under U.S. law. However, Andrew has fought any attempt to question him, no matter how neutral the circumstances. He has never presented himself for questioning, a hardcore interrogation, or a pally chat. Andrew having a horrible 2025. This year has been his personal annus horribilis, to quote his mom, the late Queen Elizabeth II. He was stripped of all his royal titles earlier this year by his brother King Charles III, with the ultimate humiliation coming last week as he voluntarily surrendered his gun license after police visited him at his Windsor residence, the Royal Lodge. The disgraced royal has never been known for his judicious choice in friends. Over the years, he has hobnobbed, sucked up, and leached from despots from North Africa to Kurdistan. His friendship with Epstein, who took his life in jail in 2019, was deeply needy. So, it would be no surprise that Andrew was also pals with another aficionado of young girls, Peter Nygard. The letter released Monday states that the former prince visited the Canadian fashion mogul at Nygard Cay, his Caribbean redoubt in the Bahamas. The investigation has revealed that on at least one occasion, Prince Andrew traveled to Nygard Cay in the Bahamas, a location where Nygard is believed to have trafficked minor and adult female victims, the letter states. U.S. authorities seek to question Prince Andrew regarding his visits to Nygard Cay during the time period under investigation, and other information he may have about Peter Nygard and related individuals. Nygard Cay was the home to outrageous sex parties, frequently featuring underage girls. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has denied any wrongdoing, but that didn't stop him from hitting up Mom for $20 million to settle a lawsuit with tragic Epstein sex slave Virginia Giuffre. She claimed he raped her 3 times when she was underage. For the men who enjoyed the largesse of Epstein and Nygaard, the walls are finally closing in. Good. There is a picture of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. They are swimming naked in a pool, and there's a big black rectangle over their bits, and their arms are entwined, and Ghislaine is laughing and winking to the camera. And up in the left corner, you can see in the blue pool water, she signed "Happy Birthday, Love, Ghislaine" with a little X. Photo courtesy of US DOJ. That story was Hunter, 2 perverts, 1 prince. Andrew's Peter Nygaard connection in Epstein files by Brad Hunter. The next story is Swastika Traced in Snow on Front Lawn of Jewish Couple's Home in Montreal by Susan Schwartz. A large swastika traced in the snow in the front yard of a Jewish physician's home is being investigated by the Montreal Police Hate Crimes Unit, a police spokesperson said this week. A 911 call was received on December 18 at 7:30 p.m., and police met with the physician's spouse who had made the call, said police spokesperson Johanny Charland. According to initial information, a swastika was traced in the snow in front of the residence, located in the borough of Côte des Neiges, Notre-Dame-des-Grâces, she said. Hope I said that okay. Investigators with the Hate Crimes Unit are looking for surveillance cameras and possible witnesses, and are interviewing neighbors, she said. The physician's spouse, who is also Jewish, arrived home in the early evening of December 18 and saw that, quote, "someone had carved this disgusting swastika in my front yard." For reasons of safety and security, the couple have requested that their identities and personal details be kept private. Although the swastika is an ancient, widely used, sacred symbol in many parts of the world, particularly in South and East Asia, its meaning was forever altered when it was appropriated by the Nazi Party in the 1920s to represent hatred, anti-Semitism, and racial superiority. "My grandfather fought the Nazis in Europe," the spouse said. "For someone who is Jewish to see a swastika is not good energy. You don't know if someone did it to target you or if it was random," said the spouse, acknowledging that the swastika might not be aimed at me, just some teenager with an empty brain. But anyone who sees it should be very concerned. A neighbor of mine who is not Jewish was concerned. Anti-Semitism in Canada has reached perilous, record-setting heights, according to the latest edition of the Annual Audit of Anti-Semitic Incidents by B'nai B'rith Canada. The audit, made public in April by the Canadian Jewish Advocacy Organization, found a spike in anti-Semitic incidents in the aftermath of the Hamas-led terrorist attacks on Israel on October 7, 2023. Israel's ensuing war against Hamas contributed to a proliferation of incidents in Montreal and elsewhere, including targeted harassment of Jewish institutions and individuals perceived as supporting Israel, and repeated cases involving graffiti, intimidation near synagogues and schools, and harassment in public spaces. The atrocities of October 7, 2023 opened deep fissures in Canadian society. Richard Robertson, Director of Research and Advocacy for B'nai B'rith Canada, said in April. The subsequent rise in anti-Semitism has exposed a disturbing undercurrent of Jew hatred driven by a virulent, radicalized minority. Canada is not alone. On December 14, a terrorist attack targeting the Jewish community in Sydney, Australia, killed 15 people. And in a YouGov survey in the United Kingdom made public this week, 51% of the general public said they believe anti-Semitism has increased in the UK since October 2023. Dr. Lior Bibas, a Montreal cardiologist and critical care specialist, is president and co-founder of the Association des Médecins Juifs du Québec, AMJQ. Sorry, can't speak French. He learned of the swastika incident from another doctor, and in a gesture of support, reached out to the couple in whose yard the swastika was found. They were a bit shaken that this happened, he said. The not-for-profit AMJQ, established shortly after the events of October 7, 2023, has about 550 members, including about 150 medical students, residents, and fellows. Its twofold mandate, Bibas explained, is for trainees to feel heard and supported, and able to turn to more experienced physicians to, quote, navigate difficult moments, and also to push back against a perceived rise in anti-Semitism within healthcare. Over the past 2 years, we have unfortunately witnessed a clear lack of political neutrality within the healthcare network. Discriminatory remarks directed at our students, healthcare professionals taking partisan positions within hospitals, and medical courses containing excerpts of propaganda, Bibas said. All of this runs counter to our shared Quebec values, founded on respect, neutrality, and equality. The Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, CIJA, a national advocacy organization, said Tuesday that it is aware of the swastika incident and that the Federation CJA and its Director of Community Security have been in contact with those affected. Here and around the world, chants of hate and incitement against Jews have gone unchecked as we have seen anti-Semitic incidents rise to an all-time high over the last 2 years, said Ida Uden, Senior Vice President of CIJA for Quebec. Last week, groups of protesters stormed into shopping centers and indigos across the country, harassing Christmas shoppers. These incidents do not happen in a silo. Concrete action must be taken against hate. Alongside our partners at Federation CJA, we will continue to engage with all levels of government and support the Montreal Police to ensure that those responsible be held accountable. There is a picture of Dr. Lior Bibas. He is standing inside what looks to be like a small patient room and maybe a hospital. He is leaning against a table that's sort of in the upright position where somebody would be laying, and he's got dark brown hair with a little salt and pepper on the sides, and his stethoscope is around his neck. Photo courtesy of Pierre Obendroff via the Montreal Gazette. That story was Swastika Traced in Snow on Front Lawn of Jewish Couple's Home in Montreal by Susan Schwartz. The next story is New Details Reveal How Quickly Rob and Michelle Reiner Were Killed by Mark Daniel. Following the release of their death certificates, new details have emerged in the horrific murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner. According to the documents, which have been obtained by TMZ, the 78-year-old actor-director and his 70-year-old wife died within minutes of receiving multiple sharp force injuries with a knife wielded by another. The two were found dead on Sunday, December 14, with Rob's death listed at 3:45 p.m. and Michelle's noted a minute later at 3:46. Homicide is listed as the cause of death for both victims. The couple's son, 32-year-old screenwriter Nick, who was reportedly diagnosed with schizophrenia before the killings and has publicly spoke about his battle with drug addiction, has since been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the deaths. Early accounts indicated that the couple's daughter, Romy, 28, discovered her father's body, but did not realize her mom was also lying dead in the family's Los Angeles area mansion. The New York Times reported that Romy arrived at her parents' Brentwood home after a massage therapist contacted her when no one answered their calls from the front gate. A person close to the Reiner family told the outlet that Romy, the youngest of Rob and Michelle's 3 children, the filmmaker is also father to Tracy, whom he adopted after he married his first wife, Penny Marshall, discovered her dad had been killed. She walked in and found her father's body and the gruesome scene of his death, according to the newspaper. Romy then fled the home without realizing that her mother was also dead inside. The Reiner's daughter was later told by a paramedic that her mother was also dead inside, the source added. TMZ had initially reported that Reiner's close friend Billy Crystal was one of the first people on the scene and saw their slain bodies, but a rep for the actor denied that report. Billy and his wife were not even allowed to get that close to the house, the spokesperson told the outlet. Early reporting indicated Romy warned investigators that her brother Nick should be a suspect because he is dangerous. But the Times said Romy did not suggest to the authorities that her brother might be a suspect. Reiner's son gave off creepy vibes night before murders. Rob allegedly told friends at Conan O'Brien's holiday party the night before he was murdered that he was terrified of his own son. According to the Daily Mail, Rob was heard saying he was petrified of Nick. "I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm afraid of my own son. I think my own son can hurt me," Rob allegedly said. Before Rob and his wife were tragically killed, the parents brought Nick, who lived in their guest house, to O'Brien's Christmas party, where he and his dad allegedly got into an argument. One attendee told the New York Times that, quote, "People seem to be very aware of Nick's history with drug abuse, and he was hovering at the fringes of the informal gathering." Another partygoer described Nick, who worked with his actor-director dad on the 2016 drug addiction drama Being Charlie, as looking anxious and uncomfortable in a way that deeply unsettled them. Nick was freaking everyone out, acting crazy, kept asking people if they were famous, an insider told People on Monday. Meanwhile, another attendee alleged to US Weekly that Nick behaved creepily at the shindig. According to the Wall Street Journal, Nick allegedly went around asking O'Brien's guests the same 3 questions. "What's your name? What's your last name? Are you famous?" At least one person he interacted with, Saturday Night Live alum Bill Hader, is alleged to have politely brushed Nick off, telling him he was interrupting a private conversation. Nick glared at him for what felt like an uncomfortable amount of time, according to one account published by The Hollywood Reporter. During the party, he was approaching people, asking questions that seemed confrontational and strange. Especially asking people there, "Are you famous?" Imagine a party of actual famous people and fame-adjacent people who are used to strange behavior out in public, but here they are at a gathering of their peers. It was unsettling to some. WSJ reporter John Jurgensen told Anderson Cooper during an appearance on AC360 last week. Hader found his interaction with Nick scary, Jurgensen said. One partygoer said O'Brien reportedly stopped guests from calling 911 on Nick. "They got in an argument. It got so bad and loud that someone wanted to call the police to report it," an insider told the Daily Mail Friday. But Conan stepped in and said, "It's my house, my party, I'm not calling the police." He talked them out of calling the police. But one guest who attended the event said that O'Brien saw no fight between Nick and Rob. "That's bullshit," the executive told The Wrap of the Daily Mail's report that O'Brien stopped people from calling the police. "There was this kid walking around making people feel uncomfortable. Eavesdropping on conversations, that kind of thing," the anonymous individual said. I said to Conan the next day, I said, "What is all this stuff about a fight?" He said, "I saw no fight." Reiner's son was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Nick was arrested outside a gas station and charged with first-degree murder in connection with his parents' death on the night of December 14. As prosecutors try to unravel a motive for the killings, TMZ reported that Nick was being treated for schizophrenia, and his new medication was making him erratic and dangerous, and out of his head. Sources told the outlet Nick was being treated by a facility that charges upwards of $70,000 a month, and that his behavior had gotten alarming in recent weeks. Nick is expected to plead not guilty to the murders by reason of insanity. Rob and Michelle's kids speak out. Rob and Michelle's children, Jake and Romy, have thanked fans for their support. In a statement to People, the two said they, quote, remain grateful for the outpouring of love and support they've received. A memorial service will be held for the couple next year. In a statement shared December 17, Jake and Romy said, quote, words cannot even begin to describe the unimaginable pain we are experiencing every moment of the day. The horrific and devastating loss of our parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner, is something that no one should ever experience. They weren't just our parents, they were our best friends. There is a picture of Michelle, Rob, and Nick Reiner. They're attending Teen Vogue's Back to School Saturday kickoff event on August 9, 2013. And Michelle is wearing black sunglasses, a tank top, and she's got some necklaces, brown hair. And Rob is in the middle with his arms around the shoulders of his wife and his son. He's smiling really big. He's got mainly white hair, a nice beard mustache, but he's bald on top. And his son has dark brown hair, looks a bit like him, and he's smiling but not looking at the camera. Photo courtesy of Michael Buckner via Getty Images. That story was New Details Reveal How Quickly Rob and Michelle Reiner Were Killed by Mark Danielle. The next story is Lily. Liberal Policies Have Destroyed Canada's Justice System by Brian Lilly. In Canada, we now have bail for people charged with sexual assault, kidnapping with a firearm, and possession of an illegal firearm. We also have reduced sentences for repeat violent sexual offenders based on their race. It's an outrageous situation, and both instances are due to bad liberal justice policies. Last Wednesday, Justice Frank Hoskins of the Nova Scotia Supreme Court handed down a 2-year sentence to Amogbolahan Teddy Jegjade for 2 violent sexual assaults. He noted that had it not been for the Impact of Race and Culture Assessment, IRCA, he would have given a longer sentence. Trudeau-era policy puts race at heart of sentencing. Impact of Race and Culture Assessments don't dictate a sentence to a judge, but judges are required to give serious consideration to them at sentencing. IRCAs are pre-sentencing reports that help sentencing judges to better understand the effect of poverty, marginalization, racism, and social exclusion on the offender and their life experience, said a news release put out by then Justice Minister David Lametti in 2021. The Justin Trudeau government took a practice that began in Nova Scotia and expanded it across the country at that time. Our government knows that systemic racism and discrimination are painful lived realities for Black and racialized Canadians, creating disadvantages in education, employment, and other areas of life, Lametti said at the time. Convict was far from underprivileged. Gigetti was hardly an underprivileged kid. He came from a loving family. His parents both have professional careers, and he was studying kinetics at St. Francis Xavier University at the time of the assaults, which happened in 2022 and 2023. According to the impact report presented to the court, however, he was feeling the pressure of being a black man in the mostly white small town of Antigonish, NS. And so, thanks to that report, Gigetti was given a more lenient sentence for choking one woman to the point of her almost losing consciousness, and restraining another while forcing her to perform oral sex. Both women were overpowered by Gigetti, who was much bigger and stronger than either of them, and he used that to force himself on them. The defense counsel for Gigetti asked that he be given a conditional sentence served in the community, while the Crown had asked for 3 years. Hoskins settled on 2 years, but felt it should have been longer, except for the report foisted on our system by the Liberal government. In my view, this is a case where the need for denunciation is so pressing, the incarceration is the only civil way in which to express society's condemnation of Mr. Gigetti's conduct, said Hoskins. Justice should be blind to race. This is the type of thing that brings the system of justice into disrepute. But it is now baked into the system and has become liberal orthodoxy. We can't challenge the idea that Gigetti needs to be held to a lower standard because of his race. This should offend every black person in Canada. It should be denounced for happening. Instead, we will continue embracing a multi-tiered system of justice based on race. We are already witnessing judge after judge giving lower sentences to people convicted of crimes in Canada based on their immigration status. That means if you're a citizen, you get a higher sentence than if you aren't. All the better to allow convicted criminals to stay in Canada and become citizens. Elections have consequences, and the result of electing Liberal governments for the last decade has been the erosion of our justice system. The fact that Osman Azizov, arrested last week and charged with attempted kidnapping with a firearm, sexual assault with a weapon, and a host of other serious charges, is out on bail and is also a ridiculous statement on our justice system. Again, though, it all goes back to Liberal policies and the Trudeau's government's decision to change the criminal code to make bail the default position in all but the most rare circumstances. We have a new Prime Minister, and they claim a new government, but we shouldn't expect any of this to change. The same liberal worldview on justice issues remains, and that means the rights of criminals will always come before the rights of victims. That story was Lily. Liberal Policies Have Destroyed Canada's Justice System by Brian Lilly. The next story is Warmington. Cop shoots suspect during alleged stabbing of mom and son by Joe Warmington. With stab wounds, the clock is always ticking on whether someone lives or dies. This was a life-and-death police call, and time was of the essence. 2 stabbing victims were in need of some hero cops. Luckily, they arrived just in time. After a relative frantically revealed that a man was inside an apartment on Shoreham Court, north of Jane Street and Finch Avenue, allegedly attacking a mother and son with a knife, Toronto police immediately tried to break down the front door and open a window to try to get in to save them. A police source said that a family relative screamed, "You have to get in there," to the responding officers. Based on what they were told, the police source said, officers on the scene believed the lives of the people in the apartment were at risk. Alleged attacker tried to keep the cops out. With haste, police ran to the door. Police say the only problem was the alleged attacker, in what has been deemed a domestic situation, tried to stop officers from barging in. The guy was on the other side of the door pushing back, said a police source. It was a terrifying ordeal. As soon as they were able to get through the door, officers saw that knife, and a police source said one of the officers allegedly faced being attacked by the man in the apartment. Later, CP24 reporter Beatrice Vaisman captured a picture of a large blade which fell right at the doorway. He discharged his weapon, said a cop, and then he and the others went right into life-saving mode. A man was rushed to a hospital with serious injuries after the police shooting. 2 people had suffered stab wounds. No charges had been laid as of press time. Acting Chief thanked cops for efforts. Addressing the troops at parade at 31 Division Tuesday, Deputy Chief Rob Johnson, who is acting chief over Christmas, talked about the courageous efforts of the cops on the call, the 911 operators, and Toronto paramedics, who were all at their best on this emergency call. Quote, "I wanted to thank them for their efforts," said Johnson. There were 6 other officers on that call who could have taken Tuesday off, but didn't. They came right back to work to protect the community. Johnson, who knows that building well, having been a sergeant in 31 Division, marveled at the effort of the team on this one. "They're so young and responded so quickly," said Johnson. "They rely on each other." The province's Special Investigations Unit, SIU, has invoked its mandate and are investigating the police shooting. The SIU always do that professionally and move much faster in getting out information regarding their investigations than they once did. While this process is underway, sources close to this describe a lot of quick and dynamic action and valor from the officers who attended this call. They faced this volatile scenario. This was a nightmare that could have been worse. No member shows up for work wanting to use force, said Toronto Police Association President Clayton Campbell. But when the public calls, they respond and are often put in the position to make split-second decisions for their safety and the safety of others. This is what happened here. After neutralizing the alleged threat to people inside and police, officers had to administer CPR to the suspect, who suffered a serious gunshot wound. They also had a female and a male inside with stab wounds. The whole thing was a nightmare, but it could have ended far worse. Police were given a special address notification when they were en route there, because there had been a previous violent incident at the address, said a source. Mom and son in stable condition. They were told there was a history of mental illness of a person at that residence, but what they encountered was danger toward 2 people who lived there. They got there just in time. The 2 family members are in stable condition, said SIU spokesperson Monica Hutton. The individual who was shot remains in hospital in serious condition. How about the officer who was faced with using lethal force? He's doing okay, said his peers. It's always traumatic when an officer has to discharge their gun. He saved 2 people's lives. He and the others who responded there are heroes. He and another officer were treated for minor injuries related to trying to force the entry. Said Campbell, the TPA was out last night supporting our members because anytime there is an officer-involved shooting, we make sure our members are getting the care and support they need because these incidents are heavy and traumatic for everyone involved. The TPA boss added, "It's an enormous responsibility, but our members are well-trained, professional, ready when the public needs them the most, and I'm very proud of them." Of course, there will have to be a formal investigation, but sometimes you don't have to wait to offer a pat on the back to police when they deserve one. This is one of those times. The next story is Maple Leafs Double Up Penguins to Enter Break on High Note by Terry Cochan. Max Domi gave Leafs Nation some Christmas cheer on Tuesday. Domi scored his prettiest goal of 2025 and 26. Granted, it was just his fourth in the third period against the Pittsburgh Penguins, helping send the Leafs to a 6-3 victory at Scotiabank Arena. Picking up speed in the Leafs' end, Domi burst through the neutral zone and deked past Penguins defenseman Brett Kulak to beat goalie Stuart Skinner with the low shot at 9:10 for the deciding goal. Bobby McMahon and William Nylander, with his second goal of the game, each scored in an empty Penguins net. A day after the firing of assistant coach Marc Savard, the Leafs broke a 3-game losing streak, and for the first time being got out of the Eastern Conference basement, moving 1 point past the Columbus Blue Jackets. Going into the 3-day Christmas break, the Leafs couldn't have needed a victory more. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. It wasn't without warts. Nothing the Leafs do these days is. But given the well-earned negativity around the team, that didn't matter. Nylander broke an 11-game goalless skid with a beauty, breaking in alone and moving to his backhand to open the scoring at 9:07, the first period. Nylander, who also had 2 assists, had not scored since November 26 at Columbus. After Savard was canned, because of the ineptitude on the power play, the Leafs had 2 brief ones in the third period. Leafs defenseman Chris Tanev had some signs of rust in his first game since November 1, when an upper body injury forced him out of the lineup. 2-goal lead disappears. The Leafs built a 3-1 lead in the second period, but Anthony Mantha tied the game 1 minute into the third when his point shot eluded Joseph Woll. It was a 3-2 Leafs lead going into the second intermission. After Steven Lorentz scored to give Toronto a 2-goal lead at 7:38 of the second period, the Penguins' Rutger McGroarty beat Woll with a shot high to the glove side, the chance coming thanks to some Leafs disorganization in the defensive zone. Lorentz took off on a breakaway upon stealing the puck from Erik Karlsson at the Penguins' blue line. Following a couple of backhand attempts, Lorentz stuffed the puck past Skinner. Goals by Nylander and Pittsburgh's Brian Rust came 44 seconds apart in the first before Matias Maccelli put the Leafs up 2-1. There is a picture of Maple Leafs forward Max Domi. He is celebrating his goal against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he is jumping up off of the ice. He's got his hands out, his legs out. He's a big X in the air. His number is 95, and he's wearing his jersey, which is a kind of a royal blue with white letters and numbers. And then behind him, you can see Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and he's doing a attaboy to him. Photo courtesy of Nathan Dennett via the Canadian Press. That story was Maple Leafs Double Up Penguins to Enter Break on High Note by Terry Cochan. The next story is Convicted Terrorist Still Poses Risk of Violent Extremism. Parole Board by the Canadian Press. Montreal. A Quebec man convicted in 2009 of plotting international terrorist attacks with a group tied to Al-Qaeda has not de-radicalized and would still pose a risk to society if released, the Parole Board of Canada says. The board denied parole to Said Namuth on December 9th, saying there remains a risk that he will violently reoffend for ideological reasons if he is let out of prison. The 2022 psychological report indicated that your political and religious beliefs had radicalized during a period of psychological distress at the moment of your offenses, and noted the absence of de-radicalization and the persistence of an extremist ideology, concluding that there's a worrying risk of violent recidivism motivated by an ideology, the report said. The psychological evaluation of risk completed in October 2025, based on information in your file, confirms these conclusions. Namuth's values and ideologies are essentially similar to what they were at the time of the crimes, the board said. Namuth, 52, was handed a life sentence in 2010 for 4 terrorism-related charges and a vaguely defined plan to bomb targets in Germany and Austria. It was only the second time in Canadian legal history that a person was sentenced to life for terrorism charges. The Moroccan-born man was involved in an organization called the Global Islamic Media Front, which was described during his trial as a terrorist group involved in propaganda and jihad recruitment. Namuth spread jihadist propaganda and conspired with the group's members to set off an explosive in a public place. The parole board said he had been ready to accomplish all the necessary tasks involved with an attack, including setting off the bomb himself. The parole board decision notes that Namuth has continued to deny taking part in any terrorist plot, and to insist that the Global Islamic Media Front is not a terrorist group. The board noted he has made some progress but remains unwilling to address the underlying causes of his radicalization, and still justifies the use of violence in some circumstances. He has also verbally lashed out at guards and broken rules in prison, including those around smoking and prayer times, the report said, leading to concerns about his ability to respect laws. The parole board decision notes that Namuth faces deportation upon release. There is a courtroom sketch of the convicted terrorist Said Numa. It's in the Montreal court on January 31, 2008. He is seen in an orange jumpsuit behind a plate of glass, and he has very short black hair and thick black eyebrows and brown eyes, and he doesn't have a happy look on his face. Photo courtesy of courtroom artist Mike McLaughlin. That story was, Convicted Terrorist Still Poses Risk of Violent Extremism, Parole Board, by the Canadian Press. The next story is, Non-Human Meat Seized from Suitcase at Chicago's O'Hare Airport, by Danette Wilford. Border Patrol officials at Chicago O'Hare International Airport found some unusual items in the suitcase of a passenger coming from Africa. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, said in a December 18 X post that the traveler from Congo brought in 11 pounds of beans that were infested with pests and 17 pounds of mysterious plants. However, perhaps the most startling discovery was the 4 pounds of, quote, non-human primate meat. Passenger thought it was okay. CBP noted the passenger, quote, believed the food they were bringing in was fine. Border Protection noted bluntly, it was not. Photos of the banned and confiscated items found in the luggage were shared in CBP's post, including several mummified small primates. Reactions to the meat. Ex-users were shocked by the findings, with one person asking, meat? That looks like a charred mummy. Another mused, imagine the smell. Some likened it to witchcraft, while another compared it to monkey brains from the 1984 movie Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. However, one user took to the CBP post comments said that this is a common way Africans process bushmeat. They added, I've tried it before. Monkey tastes like dark meat chicken. The worst bushmeat I've had was porcupine, because the cartilage of where the spines meet skin are a gross texture, and it's very gamey meat. They further explained, "This is how Congo people preserve without refrigerating. Heavy salt the carcass and smoke it over fire for a few days." The officials with the Chicago field office confirmed that all the items are prohibited and that the passengers' goods were seized and destroyed. There is a picture of two of the charred, what looks like monkeys, and they said they were monkeys, but they also look like mummies and very scary. They're just laying on this like orange plastic tarp. They're pretty much black, and you can see that on the monkey's face, the nose is charred away. All the lips are gone. You could see its teeth and just holes where the eyes were. These are very creepy. There was no photo credit given. That story was Non-Human Meat Seized from Suitcase at Chicago's O'Hare Airport by Danette Wilford. The next story is Two More Guilty in Slaying of Aspiring Outlaw MC Prospect by Brad Hunter. Two more people have pleaded guilty in connection to the slaying of Kitchener man Jason John Brown. On March 12, 2019, Brown was abducted from his cemetery in Harrison, near Mount Forest in Wellington County. A Guelph court heard that the former gang prospect was battered with a baseball bat, secured with duct tape, and thrown into a vehicle before he died. Brown was allegedly then taken to an Outlaws Motorcycle Club clubhouse in Toronto, but either died en route or after arrival. His body was found the following day at the side of Stevenson Road in Oshawa. 4 of the accused were affiliated with the Outlaws. 5 people were originally accused of playing a part in his death. On Monday, 2 men pleaded guilty to aggravated assault. Stephen Walsum, Garriggs of Brantford, and Travis Willard Wand pleaded guilty to charges related to the aggravated assault of Brown and to assault causing bodily harm in relation to another person who had gone to the cemetery with him. That individual can no longer testify about the violent events as they are dead. Now somebody else, the friend's family, has to go through what we're going through for something that had nothing to do with him. Brown's sister Nancy told CTV News on Monday, "He was just a ride for my brother to get somewhere." The others charged. Matthew Drummond of London, Ontario, was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit an indictable offense. His case continues. Joshua Alexander Drummond, also of London, was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. He pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter and was given an 8-year sentence. Jessica Martin, 35, of North Perth, was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit an indictable offense. She previously pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of being an accessory after the fact to manslaughter. Walsum Garriggs has been in custody since his arrest in 2023. He was sentenced to 5 additional days on top of time served. Wand was arrested in 2024 and sentenced to 11 months in addition to the time already served. Them pleading guilty means absolutely nothing to me and my family. Now what? We still have our lives to go on with, the victim's sister Nancy told CTV News. That story was Two More Guilty in Slaying of Aspiring Outlaw MC Prospect by Brad Hunter. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Plastic Firearms Parts Being Shipped to Canada from U.S. via Mail, CBSA, published by Postmedia News. Gun-toting criminals in Canada are using Canada Post to ship ghost gun parts into the country from the United States to bypass interdiction at the border, an internal government memos and audit says. And while information on the number of illegal guns and parts intercepted per year wasn't made available, an internal 2023 evaluation reported 68,338 firearms seized from the mail between 2018 and 2022. So-called ghost guns are often illicit firearms assembled from parts sourced from kits, purchased separately, or even created using modern 3D printing technology. Arsenal of weapons coming from United States. A Canadian Border Services Agency, CBSA, report entitled Audit of Postal Operations said 3D printed firearm parts sourced from south of the border are making their way undetected into Canada. We were informed that three-dimensional printing of firearms parts sent via the postal mode pose a risk, the report read, in a story first reported by Blacklock's reporter. For example, Border Services officers at the International Mail Processing Facilities intercepted multiple falsely declared packages destined to the same address. The packages, auditors wrote, were said to contain prohibited firearm parts, as well as 3D printing equipment used to manufacture firearms. Technology aiding the crime. A 2024 internal email to staff from CBSA President Aaron O'Gorman highlighted this troubling change. As general technology evolves and becomes more readily available, ghost guns are being added to an arsenal of illegal weapons that are trafficked across the border, often in smaller parts to foil our efforts, the report read, sourcing information from O'Gorman's staff memo. Without the vigilance of Border Services officers, there's a risk mail containing high-risk items may be released into Canada, thereby impacting the health and safety of citizens, the report read. These parts were found at major international sorting plants in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Small parcel streams such as the postal mode are often perceived as key transport methods for the illegal importation of firearms, firearm parts, and ammunition, the report read, citing anonymity as the largest reason. Senders can provide accurate information on the customs declaration, and receivers can choose to have their packages sent to a post office box. That story was Plastic Firearms Parts Being Shipped to Canada from U.S. via Mail, CBSA, published by Postmedia News. The next story is Brampton Priest Removed After Being Charged with Sex Crimes, Archdiocese Says, by Jordan Ersit. A priest posted at a Catholic church in Brampton has been removed from pastoral ministry after being charged with sex crimes, the Archdiocese of Toronto said. The Archdiocese announced the charges and the priest's removal in a statement on its website Saturday, saying that Father James Cherikal had been charged by Peel Regional Police last week on one count of sexual assault and another of sexual interference. For reference, a sexual interference charge pertains to a victim under the age of 16. Cherikal had been serving at St. Jerome's Catholic Church in Brampton since 2024, when he was charged, the statement said, with the Archdiocese of Toronto saying it learned of the allegations last week. Following our protocols and procedures relating to allegations of misconduct, Father Cherikal has been removed from pastoral ministry, the statement said. As with any accused in our Canadian legal system, he is considered innocent until proven guilty and entitled to due process. The Archdiocese of Toronto looks upon any accusation of misconduct as an urgent matter that requires serious attention. We pray for all of those who are affected by this painful situation. Accused worked at several other GTA churches. An email to Peel Police seeking confirmation of the charges and other information related to the case was not immediately returned. Police, however, told the Canadian press on Tuesday that the individual in question was arrested and charged. As the matter is now before the courts, and to protect the integrity of the investigation, no further information can be provided at this time, Peel Police told the Canadian press in a statement. The Archdiocese of Toronto said Cherrickell has also worked at St. Patrick in Mississauga, 1997 to 2004, St. Joseph in Mississauga, 2004 to 05, Precious Blood in Scarborough, 2005 through 2006, and 2010 through 2012, St. Mary in Brampton, 2006 to 2010, St. Thomas Syro-Malabar Mission, 2010, St. Anne in Brampton, 2012 through 18, and St. Francis Xavier in Mississauga, 2018 to 2024. That story was Brampton priest removed after being charged with sex crimes, Archdiocese says, by Jordan Ursit. The last story is editorial. Yes, we'll say it. Merry Christmas, published by Postmedia News. Of all the silly controversies that arise in the course of a year, the annual controversy over greeting people during the holiday season with Merry Christmas has to be the silliest. It's not a political statement. It's not intended to disparage religions other than Christianity. It's not meant to isolate or exclude anyone. It's a simple expression of seasonal goodwill, and people who are offended by it tend to be people who live their lives devoted to finding offense. The good news is that most Canadians don't take it that way. In fact, Merry Christmas appears to be making a bit of a comeback in society. A poll by the research company of 1,002 Canadian adults this month found that for the first time in 6 years, more than two-thirds of Canadians, 67%, prefer saying Merry Christmas to Happy Holidays, up by 5 points from last year. Meanwhile, fewer than 1 in 5 Canadians, 18%, down 6 points from last year, prefer Happy Holidays, with 16% unsure or not caring either way. There is no question that we're living in challenging times, from the state of our economy to fraught global geopolitics, ongoing wars, and terrorism. But when it comes to the spirit of the season, people of goodwill know that the message behind the greeting of Merry Christmas speaks to what we know is right in our hearts, whatever our religion, and whether or not we believe in God. That's all the time we have for the story, which was editorial. Yes, we'll say it, Merry Christmas. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 23, 2025 issue of the Toronto Sun. Your reader has been Melanie Guralnick. Thank you for listening.